All right, so we got a little bit more to talk about to wrap up this valuation chapter. Just a couple more things. We'll be done with another chapter. How about that? So let's take a look at when it comes to measuring. Obviously, this is going to also be a big part of what we do as real estate agents. How do you know? Because, we were talking in the previous hour or two. We know value is based in large on the price per square foot. Well, obviously, if we're going to value that way, then you got to know how many square feet we're dealing with, right? So how do you know the square footage of the home that you're trying to sell or the house? And look, there are a lot of different ways to go about trying to figure that out, I guess, or different sources, I guess you could take a look at. And probably the primary way that a lot of people will do this is they just go by whatever it's in the tax records. And now let me say right up front. You better pay attention to what is your company's policy in regards to reporting square footage. Because at the end of the day, then that's how you must report, based on whatever your company's policies are. For example, your company's policy may dictate that you just use and report whatever the tax record says. Maybe your company policy says we're not going to disclose or provide the square footage at all. Now we'll tell you that's going to also have a lot to do with the MLS that you're also in, because obviously this is part of the national portion of the real estate information you're going to be tested on. So we're talking about all 50 states could have different requirements. So there are a lot of things that would need to be considered, which, and I'm not even going to try to address all the different possibilities. But one, you need to know what your state law perhaps requires when it comes to reporting square footage. And then in addition to that, what's your company's policies? Not every company is going to be the same. Certainly not every state's going to be the same. But as the licensee, you're doing it right if you're complying with what your state law requires, and in addition to that, what your company policy requires. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, some companies may say we're going to actually measure the house, which, and I will tell you, I think is the best idea by far. You need to measure the house. Or if not you, somebody needs to measure the house. That's the only way to know for sure or have an accurate square footage. You got to measure it. For me, I'm just got to be honest here. If I'm the buyer or the seller, and I'm paying you however much commission we've agreed upon, part of that would be, or part of that understanding, at least for me, is that you're going to be diligent enough, which, by the way, is a fiduciary duty, if you recall, diligence, to know what the square footage is. You have an obligation, in my opinion, to verify all information that is relevant in the decision-making process. And obviously, the value is relevant when making an offer on real estate. And when you know the value is based in large by square footage analysis, obviously that's a pretty significant piece of information. And it needs to be based on the accurate information. I'm just going to tell you, certainly in my market and in the county that I live in, using the tax records is a terrible idea. In fact, you ask almost any agent, veteran, experienced agent about the tax records in this local market, just ask them, what is it that we all know about the tax records? Y'all, and they will tell you it's wrong. It's almost always wrong. What we don't know is, have they reported in the tax records more than what there actually is, or is there less than what there actually is? And there are a lot of reasons why they're wrong, okay? Now, I'm not trying to suggest they're wrong for what they're using it for they being the county, but it is wrong for what we're using it for most of the time, almost every time. And it could be 100, 200 feet difference oftentimes. Well, is there a big difference between, say, 2,000 feet versus 2,200 feet? Is that a big difference? Obviously, we're talking about 200 square feet. Is that a big difference? Well, if you look at just the area of 200 feet, you might say, well, that's not that big a deal. Okay, well, what if and I'm being extremely conservative just for practical purposes, but let's say the value is $100 a foot, which I will tell you is very cheap, very conservative today. Well, $100 a foot, and there's 200 feet, what's the value of that 200 feet difference? Well, that'd be $20,000. $20,000. So say, for example, the tax records showed that there's 2,000 feet. In reality, there's 2,200 feet, but you priced it based on the 2,000 because that's what's in the tax records. Just in this example, you're $20,000 underpriced, potentially. Okay? Or it could be the other way around, vice versa. But, this is important. I think you need to be able to verify square footage, and the only way to verify it is to measure it. Either you measure it or have someone, i.e. an appraiser, to go out and measure it for you. Now, I will tell you, if you're having an appraisal done on the property, that's part of what the appraiser does. So they will measure it, and there'll be a sketch, or should be. There should be a sketch of the property that indicates what the square footage actually is. Now, again, one potential problem between what we need and what the county might be reporting, and again, every county is different, certainly from state to state and county to county. There's a difference between total square footage and heated living area square footage. That could be a huge difference, big difference. Well, when it comes to valuation and what we're trying to determine as real estate agents, we have to know what the heated living area is. Heated square footage, heated living area. I'm talking about all the same things here. Now, there could be other areas of the house, i.e. a garage. That would also be considered part of the total square footage, but the garage typically is not considered heated living area. So the tax records might be reporting total square footage, and if you're using that, then you're going to be way over, right? Anyway, so when you put the square footage in the MLS, and I think most places would require that, quite frankly. I know that's a mandatory field in our market. You got to put something there. But the square footage it's asking for in the MLS is heated living area. That's different than total square footage. The appraiser has to determine what is the actual heated living area. So that's what we're going to talk about right here, okay? We're not going to spend a whole lot of time. I will tell you, this is something, you just got to practice till you get good at it. But let's take a look at it. So how do we determine or calculate what is the heated living area square footage? Well, I think it would be a good idea for everybody to have a standard, and quite frankly, I think everybody should be using the same standard when we're trying to calculate this square footage, the living area. The primary, if not the only, standard used by appraisers. Now, quite frankly, when appraisers go out and measure, appraisers all use the same standard. Because look, you give 10 people a tape measure and say, go measure the house, you're going to come up with 10 different measurements, and could be drastically different measurements because they didn't all measure the same way. They didn't use the same standards. So, that's why we really need a standard to go by. And the standard you're going to see appraisers using, so obviously that's the one that we're going to use here, it's called the American National Standards Institute, or what you hear it called or referred to a lot is ANSI, the ANSI standard. It just stands for American National Standards Institute. But when it comes to measuring based on this standard, all your measurements should be based on exterior measurements. See, that's another problem. If we don't have a standard, you're going to have some people, some agents, that are going to be measuring the house from the inside, from the interior. You should not be doing that. All measurements should be based on exterior measurements. Again, exterior, not interior. We're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go through. All right. But you'll notice here, it's obviously on the slide, it's also in the book if you've got that in front of you. There are basically 3 criteria that must be met in determining whether this is heated living area. Again, because a lot of people say, well, I think this should be heated living area. Some people say, no, it's not. Again, well, then there needs to be a standard. How do we decide what's living area and what's not living area? Well, according to ANSI, there are 3 criteria, and as long as the area you're measuring meets all 3 of these criteria, then it's considered heated living area. So let's take a look at them. Number 1, the area, again, must be heated, cooled by the same conventional system that's heating and cooling the rest of the house. Now, what does that mean? Well, look, here's where you tend to see some issues, or I see a lot of times when I'm doing appraisal, you'll see these issues, they're common, where the room over the garage. You could have like a finished room over the garage. We refer to that as a frog. Maybe in different parts of the country you call it other things. But it's just the finished room over a garage. A lot of times there's no ductwork going into that space. They will have a window unit or something like that in order to heat and cool just that room. Now, the rest of the house has a heating and air unit outside like most houses have that heat and cool the house. It's just that room over the garage does not heat and cool by that system. There's no ductwork even going into the room. So they have some other way of heating and cooling. Well, then that does not meet the ANSI standard. Typically, if you have a window unit, that's not going to count. But again, some people say, well, but it's still heated and cooled. Okay, but that doesn't meet the standard of heated living area according to ANSI. So I could not count that room as part of the heated living area square footage. Now, let me go ahead and say this too, to be clear, because I know some of you think, so you're telling me that room has no value? You're not going to count it at all? That is not what I said. I said it cannot be counted as heated living area. It does have value, and likely it will have significant value. The problem is, when you're valuing property like this, the heated living area value is going to be more than what non-heated living area value would be. Again, I'm just making up numbers right now, okay? So don't try to say, well, Frank, there's no way it's worth it. I'm just making up numbers. But we may decide, y'all, through analysis, y'all, this is not just numbers I'd pull out of the air. You'd actually do your market analysis to break all this down. But you may just say, all right, so for a heated living area, we're going to value that square footage at $100 per foot. But because that room over the garage it's not heated and cooled by the same conventional system doing the rest of the house. It's actually got a window unit. Then I'm going to value that at $70 a foot. Okay, so it's got value. It's just not going to have as much value as the rest of the house. But y'all, if you tried to add it all together and say it's all worth $100 a foot, you're going to be overpriced. It ain't going to be worth what it's not going to sell for that. All right, so we know it's got to be heated and cooled by the same conventional system doing the rest of the house. Y'all, number 2, it says it must be y'all, the area you've measured must have finished walls, floors, ceilings that are generally accepted for interior construction. Well, what are you talking about there? Well, here's where I see issues with that standard. And it's very common in houses that actually say have a garage, but they've decided to enclose the garage and turn it into living area. Make it their den or their family room or whatever. Y'all have taken the garage door down, walled it off, and basically made a new room in the house. Well, can you now count that as heated living area? Well, first of all, is it heated and cooled by the same conventional system as the rest of the house? Y'all, again, if you've got window units, no. Now, we'll tell you, y'all, they have what they call mini splits. Y'all, if you're not familiar with that, you can look that up. But y'all, a mini split, y'all, it has its own compressor unit. Typically, again, the compressor sits on the exterior of the house. Works kind of like what you see in a lot of hotel rooms, if you will. You see these units in a hotel room, kind of similar to that. If they got that, then we would count it, mainly because it has a separate compressor and whatnot. But if it's just a window unit, not going to work. But back to number 2, the finished walls, floors, and ceilings. Y'all, number 1, y'all, there could be a lot of problems with an enclosed garage. When I say problems, reasons why you cannot count it as heated living area. One reason, y'all, you tend to see a lot is, y'all, usually the wall that's separating the garage from the actual house itself, say, is brick, or some kind of exterior siding that you tend to see all the way around the house. Say it's a brick siding. Then you got a brick wall there. Well, a lot of times they just leave that brick wall. Well, y'all, that's exterior walls. That's an exterior siding. That's not interior. Therefore, it does not meet the heated living area criteria. That's just one example. Probably the biggest issue you see is, y'all, when they enclose the garage, y'all, they'll just put carpet or some kind of laminate down right on top of the concrete. Can't do that. Y'all, floors need to have or must have a subfloor. Y'all, you got to build it up a little bit. Y'all, if you just try to install flooring right on top of the concrete, y'all, put a couch or something down in there to sit in, y'all, you'll notice when you sit on the couch, you're sitting kind of like to the side, if you're paying attention. Y'all, because they build the garage, y'all, is sloped so that any water or rain that might blow into the garage can drain back out. So it's not level, okay? So you can't just throw flooring on top of it. Y'all, you'd have to install a subfloor that levels everything up, gets it up off the concrete, and then go from there. And if you're gonna do that, and you should do that, y'all, if you're gonna close the garage, you need to put the subfloor, then build the subfloor up to the same level as the rest of the house. Y'all, typically, y'all, when you're walking out of the garage and into the house, you're walking up 2 or 3 steps. Or if you're coming out of the house into the garage, you got to walk down a couple of steps or so. Y'all bring the subfloor up, and then there's no steps involved. And I will tell you, that's a big reason, or how appraisers will determine whether to count or not. Y'all, is because if I'm still having to walk down, typically that means there's no subfloor, so I cannot count it as heated living area. Y'all, it might meet all the other criteria. Y'all, it heats and cools fine. Y'all, everything else is fine, but because you've got no subfloor, y'all, it does not meet the criteria of finished walls, floors, and ceilings generally accepted for interior construction. So you're not going to be able to count that in that situation. Y'all, that's the second criteria. Then the third criteria says that this area you're counting must be directly accessible from other living area. Y'all, where you see the issue there, y'all, and I kind of like this layout a lot myself personally, but y'all, a lot of times you'll see where you got a house that also has a garage, but it might be a detached garage with maybe a walkway that you can actually walk under or through to go from the garage to the house. And then there may be a room over the garage, and that room might be finished, and it meets all, or at least the first two criteria. Heating and cooling, good to go. It's all finished with interior construction, good to go. The problem is there's no way to get to that space without walking out of living area. Y'all, typically that walkway between the house and the garage is not living area, right? So if you have to leave living area, walk to wherever you're going to get into additional living area, y'all, that additional living area cannot be counted as part of the heated living area for the home. Now again, it has value. Y'all, so when I say you cannot count something as heated living area square footage, it doesn't mean that area or that square footage does not have value. But it has to be valued separately, and typically it's not going to have as much, and a lot of times not nearly as much value as what the other heated living area square footage is going to have. Y'all, I hope that makes sense to you. Y'all, I have people tell me all the time, well, I've got this shop in my backyard. It's heated and cooled. It's finished. Even got a bathroom in it. Y'all have seen that? And they're thinking that should be counted as heated living area. No. Y'all, because I had to walk out of the house to get to it. Y'all, so number 3, y'all can't do it. Y'all, basements a lot of times. Y'all, there are a lot of people that have a basement, but there's no way to access the basement except through the exterior. Y'all, there's only an exterior entrance. There's no stairs to get from the main living area down into the basement. There's only an exterior door there. Even though it might be finished and gorgeous and beautiful living area down there, y'all, because I have to leave living area on the main floor to go outside to get into the basement, then that cannot be counted as heated living area, right? So, y'all, those are the 3 criteria. So the areas that you're measuring, as long as they meet all 3 criteria, we're good. Y'all, you can count that as your heated living area. And then the areas that don't meet this criteria, y'all, you've got to separate that. Y'all, you might wind up saying, you might say, look, in fact, the MLS that I deal with, or I'm in, there's actually a space where you can report total square footage. And I might put 2,500 square feet of total. But then it'll say heated living area square footage. And I might put 2,200. Then it'll put other square footage. And that would be the other 300 square feet. And then obviously I would explain that breakdown and so forth, in the MLS. But y'all, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. So let's take this a little bit further. Y'all, this is where agents really need to do a better job, at least in the market I'm in. Now that we've understand what the criteria is to count something as heated living area, now you got to answer. Here's the next question: is that living area considered above grade or is it below grade? You've got to have the answer to that, and you need to list that in the MLS. You may have 2,500 square feet of heated living area, but only 2,000 of it is above grade. 500 of it might be below grade. Y'all, that matters. That's a big That's a big deal. So what are we talking about here? Y'all, above grade is any living area that's above the surface of the ground. Obviously, below grade would be any living area that's below the surface of the ground. Now, what does that mean below? Because I will tell you, if any one wall, and all you need is just one wall to have any earth or dirt adjacent to any portion of it. Doesn't have to cover the whole wall, just a few inches of the living area has dirt or outside the exterior wall, then that entire level is considered below grade. Even though it might be built on a slope. The house is built on a slope, right? So up here, it might be a little bit below grade. But as you go out to this side of the space, because the slope lays out, there's no dirt against this exterior wall. Doesn't have to be. Only one wall has to have dirt or earth adjacent to that wall, and that entire level, however many square feet is on that level, is considered below grade. Obviously the most common example of below grade is a basement. Basements typically are below grade. They're below the earth, right? You got dirt adjacent to the wall, at least one wall, if not all the way around. You see them a lot of times, very common with like a tri-level home. You ever notice, some houses, you'll see, and I assume you know what a tri-level is, just means just 3 levels to the home. A lot of times on the lower level, you see the windows, lower level, they might just be 6 inches off the ground. The window. That looks kind of weird. You got a window just a few inches, maybe a foot off the surface of the ground. That's because when you go inside there, it's actually below the surface. So a lot of times tri-level homes have a lot of below grade. But you got to separate those two. So you can't just report the total heated living area if some of it's above grade and some of it's below grade. If it is, you got to break that out. How much is above? How much of it's below? Again, because it's going to most likely be valued differently. Again, you just add them all up into one lump sum and assign one value for all of it, you're going to be off. You're going to be wrong. But y'all make sure you know how much is above grade, how much is below grade, and report that in the MLS. You got to put that in there. That's critical information we need to know in the valuation process. Okay? All right. Now let's talk about measuring land. And by the way, before we get into the land, we have in most states will have like a unit 2 or a second class you have to take to get your real estate license. We certainly do in South Carolina, where I'm from. And in the advanced class, in the unit 2, whatever your state wants to call it, we actually have a whole section where we spend a few hours on actually measuring a house, how to do that. What I wanted to show you there is just some, what you need to know about measuring it. Okay, we'll actually get into measuring it in the next course. But then we need to talk about measuring land. And what you're looking at here are what I consider to be memory items. y'all, you will get a test question, most likely a math question where you're having to calculate square footage. Well, couple memory items here. Y'all, if you know that there's 43,560 feet per acre, y'all, that's going to be very helpful. Y'all, you need to know that. In fact, I will tell you, none of this information will be provided to you in the test question because it's something as a real estate agent you should know. But anyway, there's 43,560 feet per acre. And then it also says there's 5,280 linear feet per mile. Why does that matter? What is the big deal there? Well, let's look. Y'all, let's say, for example, y'all, you might have a, y'all, let me get my, y'all, if you got your calculator, you're going to need it to do this. But y'all, say, for example, you've got, y'all, you look in the tax records to see how much land was with this property. Y'all, it might tell you, you got 0.6 acres of land, y'all, for example. But a lot of times it'll say you've only got 13,800 square feet. Well, you tell the buyer, all right, well, buyer, you want to know how much land it is. It's 13,800 square feet. Well, what's the buyer going to say? Well, what does that mean? Y'all, we all want to know what is that in acres. Y'all, that tends to be how we kind of identify things. Well, if you know there's 43,560 feet per acre, but yet in this lot, I think we said, what I say, 13,800. So, y'all, if you take that 13,800, put that in your calculator, and then divide it by the number of square feet per acre, which is 43,560, then we know there's about 0.31 acres, or if you round it up, 0.32 acres. Okay? Need to know that. Well, why do I need to know how many linear feet there are per mile? Well, what if you get a test question that says you've got a lot with a quarter mile of road frontage and a quarter mile deep? Y'all, for example, let me see if I can draw something here for you. Y'all, I've got this lot that's got a quarter of a mile across the front, right through there. And then it's also a quarter of a mile deep. Quarter mile by quarter mile. Well, how many feet is that? Well, I know if there's 5280, if there's 5280 in a mile, so 5280 divided by 4, because that's a quarter, then that's going to give you 1,320 feet. Right? 1,320, same thing right there. 1,320. Now, if they said it's a half mile deep, then we know it's 2,640 feet, right? The key is, as long as you know how many feet there are per mile, you should be able to figure out what's a quarter, what's a half, and so forth. So if there's 1,320 by 1,320, just multiply that. So 1,320 times 1,320, that should give you 1,742,400. If I'll just write it down here. 1,742,400. Y'all, that's how many square feet you have in that parcel. But they might not ask you for the square feet. They might give you that information and say, well, how many acres is that? Okay, well then you take that 1,700,000 divided by how many feet per acre? 43,560 would be 40 acres. Oops. So y'all, you should, well, let me back up. Y'all, so you should come up with the, anyway, 40 acres is what you should have gotten on that. But y'all, my point is, y'all, those are two memory items. Y'all, you're going to be expected to know. Y'all, that information will not be provided to you in the question. Okay. Now, I actually have an example here, but it said you got a parcel of land that has 100 feet of frontage and 200 feet deep. What is the acreage for this parcel? Again, you take the 150 times 200, that's 30,000. Then divide that by the number of feet per acre, and then you should get 0.69 acres, right? Good stuff. And, and this is kind of like the example I just gave you, but if you got a parcel of land that's a 1/4 mile of frontage and a 1/2 mile deep, what's the acreage of this parcel? Well, then you got to figure out, 1/4 mile, we already know is 1,320 feet. 1/2 mile, half of the 5,280 is 2,640. Multiply those two together, there's your total square footage, and then just divide it by the number of feet per acre. And there you see you should have 80 acres of land there. So again, that's memory. And I will tell you, that's information you're going to use daily when you're practicing real estate. So might as well go ahead and memorize those two numbers now. Okay. All right. And then to wrap this up, here's the appraisal process. Now that you know everything there is to know about appraisal, now we tell you the process. Number one, you got to define the problem. Right? What's the problem? What's the function? What's the purpose of this appraisal? Then it says we got to put together a preliminary plan of action. In other words, what kind of information do I need to obtain to solve the problem? And then step 3 says I will now go collect that data, that information. Then I will analyze, process the data. I will apply, if I can, I will apply all 3 approaches to value. Y'all remember? Sales comparison, income approach, and the cost approach. If I can use all 3, then I will use all 3. If I can't, then I'll just use whichever ones I can use. And then lastly, we have to come up with our final estimate of value. But then you see this term here, last thing you should see is a term called reconciliation. That's an appraisal term, meaning that the appraiser has used all 3 approaches to value to come up with their estimate or opinion of value. They've used all 3. So, my sales comparison approach says it's worth this amount. The income approach says it's worth this amount. And the cost approach says it's worth this amount. And hopefully there won't be a gigantic difference between the value of the 3. But at the end of each day, then you need to decide which one of the 3 do I need to put the most weight on. Which one of the 3 do I put the middle amount of weight, or the second amount of weight, and then the third, right? Then, so you're reconciling the 3 approaches to try to come up with your final opinion of value, and that's what you're doing here, okay? That's appraisals. If you're like a lot of us, by this point, certainly with everything, the chapters we've already discussed throughout this course, you're thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to keep all this in my head? Because we still got some more we got to go over. This is a lot of stuff. Don't let anxiety start building in. Don't do that. Okay? I promise you this is not that hard, and it's not. And the good news is every single question is multiple choice, so you got a 25% shot at worst at getting the answer right. And then you'll find also, a lot of this stuff is kind of common sense, if you will. Even though you might have 4 options, a lot of times you can eliminate at least 2 of them, and sometimes 3 of them just right off the bat. You just know. So don't get all uptight especially if the math is an issue for you. We're going to be doing some more math coming up. We got plenty of that. But the main thing to remember, it helped me, and I dead serious when I say this. And I've gotten to the point where, you know what, I don't stress and worry about stuff anymore. Because I can do all things through Jesus. He's going to help me through it. We got this. I'm not even worried about it. And you don't need to worry about it either. Just put your faith and confidence where it needs to be. You'll be very, very successful. No question about it.